Hi, and welcome to Woman at the Wheel, my YouTube channel. I'm Sue. I'm cruising through McAlester, Oklahoma right now, around the edge of it actually, on the bypass, which is a morass at the moment of construction and confused traffic. So, a little slow getting through here, but not too horrible. We haven't stopped completely yet. Just slowed down a few times. I just came through the mountains. I had to kind of cut that short because I had a phone call come in, which I do just stop my video. If I get a phone call like that, I just stop it. I'll have to edit it later, or I may not be able to use it. I don't know. But I'm, certainly not going to bore you with my personal phone calls. So if you hear the phone ring, you pretty much know this is the end of this video because I don't have the capability to do both at the same time. Well, I guess I could, but like I say, you don't want to hear my personal conversations, I'm sure. So we just came through the mountains of southeastern Oklahoma, and I got most of that on video, and even though it might have a kind of a crappy ending, not such a smooth like segue or whatever, I'm going to edit that and post it up because it did end with a phone call. But it's kind of a neat part of the state, and not everybody knows it exists. So now, I think in that video, or it might have been the one before, I was talking about when I get up here to I-40, taking a right and going over to Muskogee and circumventing Tulsa. Well, I realized once I got up here by McAlester that Highway 69 intersects the Indian Turnpike, and I could just take 69 straight over to Muskogee and thus avoid the whole Tulsa area entirely and avoid I-40 and avoid all the other stuff and stick to my route. This is a much better route. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here. I'm going to be going by Lake Eufala pretty soon, which is a giant lake on, I believe it's the Canadian River that they've dammed up, and it's a giant lake. If I don't get a phone call before we get across it, you'll probably get to see some of it across the hood of my truck. Now, I've been to Lake Eufala once as kind of a touristy thing. My husband and I went over there when we first got our little camping trailer that we've got. We've got a vintage 65 Shasta trailer, and we got it from a lady over in Lawton who had it fixed up really cute. Well, when we bought it from her, she took out all the cute stuff, so I had to figure out my own cute to do it. It was fair. I mean, she didn't like pull it out sneaky like, but so I had to figure out my own way to make it cute. So I went with a southwestern theme, kind of hot southwestern is what I was thinking. So I went with reds and oranges and turquoises and that kind of color scheme. So it's really kind of a fun little camper. And I really, if I was artistic enough, I would paint the outside of it. That's police, not troopers. Sorry, I've seen 4 troopers today and a couple of cops now coming through McAlester. These guys are working hard today. So anyway, if I was an artistic type of person, which I'm not, I mean, I have a little bit, I guess I inherited a little bit of artistic skill from my mom. She was really an artist. She could paint, she could play a lot of instruments. She's very musical, very artistic human being. I guess I inherited just enough of that to where I make a good draftsman, because I worked as a draftsman for years before I was a cop, before I was a truck driver. So I can draw, but I don't always have like really cool ideas of what to draw. And I think a lot of being an actual artist is having the vision of what you're going to do, as much as having the ability to put it down on whatever medium it is that you're using. So I don't by any means pretend to be artistic like that. I don't have that visionary kind of imagination at all. But I would at some point like to paint that trailer, the outside of it, to be as cute as the inside of it is, because the outside's kind of bland. It's pretty much the way it looked in 1965. It's a kind of a white trailer with a maroon stripe on the side, and that's kind of it. Not very distinctive. It doesn't have the Shasta wings on it either. We need to find some reproductions and put on there, I guess. But it would make it look a little flashier maybe. But I'd really like to do the exterior with some different colors that go with my scheme. Then again, I don't want to mess it up because it's kind of the original colors, but it has been painted, so I think I'm good to go. So if I think of some way to paint it and make it pretty, I will. But back to my original point, we came over, when we first got it, we brought it over here to Lake Eufala. And we had kind of a false start on that trip because we pulled out and got on the highway a few miles from the house, and I could see down the passenger side of the trailer that something didn't look right. I got to looking, something was flapping around back there, so I had my husband pull over and we went back and looked, and the door, the frame to the door was so old and decrepit that it had broken, so the door was actually flapping at the bottom. So we had to stop and turn around and go home. We ended up rebuilding the door. We put it back on, and then we got back in and got back on our trip. So we came over here to Lake Eufala. One of the things that I like to do in my spare time is hunting arrowheads. I'm real big on arrowhead hunting, and I posted up another video, or I'm getting ready to anyway, about my pull tab theory of arrowheads. So if you're interested in that, go listen to that video. But one of the things that I was doing is I was keeping an eye out over there under the dam, under the spillway, to see if I could see anything interesting, which I didn't. I didn't find anything. I know some people do. And I got to thinking, I don't even know if it's a legal spot to do it. It's probably not, so it's probably a good thing I didn't see anything, because I'm sure I would have picked it up. But that was my one and only experience at Lake Eufala. And the lake itself is pretty. It's a typical Oklahoma lake. Oklahoma has more shoreline than like a lot of coastal states, I think is how it works, is what they say. But also Oklahoma has no natural lakes. All of the water in Oklahoma that was here before men started tinkering with stuff and building ponds and lakes was in the form of streams and rivers. So in its natural state, Oklahoma had 0 lakes. Now it's got a lot of lakes, and Eufaula is one of the bigger ones. I believe Texoma is a little bigger. Of course, Texoma is the Red River dammed up down on the Oklahoma-Texas border. But Lake Eufala, I can see it out here beside us. It's a little bit of it. We're going to be crossing a couple of segments of it. Hopefully you'll get to see some of it without the trees in the way once we get up here on the bridges. From all accounts, this is a great fishing lake, and I'm not sure what all else they do here. A lot of lakes in Oklahoma are distinguished by the usage. Like we had when we first moved down here to Oklahoma, we bought a cabin on a lake over by Marlow, Oklahoma, called Lake Humphreys. Now, Lake Humphreys is strictly a fishing lake. You don't swim in Lake Humphreys, you only fish there. The next closest lake is Clear Creek Lake, and it's a fishing and swimming lake. So they have a swimming beach, and then they have docks and crappie houses, and you can fish and swim there. So Eufaula is probably a multi-use lake, as big as it is, I would guess. So they probably got all of the various water sport type things going on over here. But I do know that it's considered to be a really good fishing lake. And one of the features of a lot of lakes in this state, there's part of it right there, they kind of meander around. It's not like one big round lake in one big wide valley. The terrain around here is hilly, so there are a lot of little valleys and branches that run off different directions and all that. So these lakes aren't like one big open expanse of water. They kind of snake around through the hills. and it's kind of makes it interesting. There are areas where there is a large expanse of open water, but then a lot of it you can if you're in a boat, you can follow some of these arms of the lake up certain creeks and things, and you can go quite a ways back up in there till you get to the actual original creek in a lot of cases. And then it gets too shallow to take the boat in, and you turn around and go back to the lake. So it's kind of interesting terrain, and it's an interesting thing to think about to me, that a place that is as diverse as Oklahoma, with different types of ground to it, would have 0 natural lakes. I mean, if you think about Oklahoma, think about the Texas Panhandle and the Oklahoma Panhandle. Well, those are basically the same thing. The Oklahoma Panhandle is just aligned along the north edge of the Texas Panhandle. And that country up there it's higher elevation. It's about probably 4,000 or 5,000 feet elevation, I would guess, maybe 3,000. But it's the highest elevation in Oklahoma is found in the Panhandle. And it's very much high plains type of grassland up in there. So that's one very different type of land compared to, then you go into the western side of Oklahoma, and it's more blackjack oak forests on hills and creeks. And then you get into southwestern Oklahoma, and then you get more into the arid kind of plains type of land. And then you get over where we're at, kind of on the line between I-35 and where we're at to the west of I-35, and you start moving from plains and hills into more timber and more hills, and you get like over into the Arbuckles. So that the Arbuckle Hills, the Arbuckle Mountains, are just a short little range, a short little rise of mountains. You cross it when you come up I-35 north of Ardmore. But it's more green and lush once you get on the other side of 35 than it is on the west side of I-35. So it kind of transitions all across the state. So then you get into, of course, southeastern Oklahoma, and you've got the mountains here. Northeastern Oklahoma, it's very hilly, a lot of water, and you start getting into the kind of Missouri Hills, Ozark feel. So it's very, there's a lot of variety from one corner of the state to the other. So I just think it's kind of neat that, that with all this going on, that, and only since like 1907, I think, was when Oklahoma became a state, that so much has been done to the lay of the land as far as building lakes and ponds and all of that. I mean, they've really built a lot. So we're crossing the last, I think this is, no, we may cross a little more of it, but this is a good chunk of Eufala here we're crossing. At any rate, I just think it's kind of interesting, and it makes me wonder, who thought all this stuff up? Well, I know how some of it started. The lake that we lived on, for instance, Lake Humphreys, was built as a flood control lake back in the day before Humphreys was built, and I believe it was built in 1952. Before that, there was a lot of flooding in the area. There's a creek in the area called Wild Horse Creek, and it starts just up on the north side of Marlow, not too far from where I live now. And it picks up all the runoff clear down from Marlow, down south of the town, and it cuts across kind of at a southeastern angle and then easterly across. It ends up dumping into, I think, the Washita River. Well, by the time it gets over there, it's a pretty good creek. It's pretty deep, pretty steep and deep creek. So a lot of water moves through that area. And they got tired of everything getting flooded, so this Mr. Humphreys, I think, was the guy who actually initiated the lake building program to control the flooding situation there. So a lot of these lakes are flood control measures. And they've also got another use. They use them for municipal water systems. So the lakes there that are actually closer to Marlow are owned by the city of Duncan. And there's a lake up north of Marlow, Lake Taylor, that's actually owned by the city of Marlow. So they pump water from these lakes into their municipal water systems. But at the same time, they also provide recreation. So they have usually campsites where you can take your trailer or go pitch a tent and go camp out. And a lot of the cities do this. They have their own little campgrounds out at the lakes. So you can go out there and you can usually buy a lake permit of some type. Sometimes they're like, I don't know, $10, $25 for the year or whatever. And with this permit, that gives you permission to go do all this other stuff, to fish on the lakes, to swim in the lakes, whatever it is they allow there. And then you might pay a little extra for camping. They had a campground down at the south end of the Lake Humphrey concession road, and it got pretty bad for a while because we had a drug dealer move into the lake, and he brought with him all his druggy friends, and then his druggy friends found out it was a cheap place to live down there if they could just get a junky trailer and move in there. So the guy that was supposed to be patrolling the lakes was kind of retired on duty. He wasn't much help. So they kind of took over the campground down there for a while, and they really tore it up. And it wasn't in great shape anyway, but there was a restroom down there, men's and ladies, a restroom building. I can't get over, so I'm just going to slow down. Sorry, guys. So anyway, the druggies came in and just basically tore it up, and then they brought in a bunch of junky trailers and left them out there and abandoned some of them. And I mean, these were, I'm not being snobby when I tell you, these were junky. They were falling apart trailers, and they had like one of them in particular was pretty rough looking. It had an actual hollow core interior door for the front door of this travel trailer that had been cut out to fit. And I mean, just stuff like that. And then they sit down there and do the dope and scare all the actual tourists off. So people quit going to the lake because they just got scared out of there by these, druggy people. So finally, the guy that was supposed to be taking care of all this got his ass canned for not doing his job, or either that or for embezzling. I'm not sure which, or both, which most everybody kind of figured he was anyway, not doing his job and probably embezzling. So he got canned, and they brought in a new guy. Well, there was a new sheriff in town then, and he came through and cleaned everything up and kicked everybody out. And the way they did that was, I think they cut off the electricity to the campground, because they had electrical hookups and water hookups and stuff. I think he shut all that down and told them to get out. So they went through, and a year or so ago they built a new bathhouse, which is, I guess, pretty nice. It's a concrete block looking type building. I haven't been in it, but it's an improvement. They rebuilt the dock. I think they went through and cleaned up the campground real well, and they fixed up some of the stuff that the druggies went in there and tore up, like the electrical outlets and things. They kind of tore those up. I think they've kind of replaced that and cleaned it up some, and so they're back to having, just regular people come in and camp. So it's kind of coming back. They did the same thing at Clear Creek Lake. They had the same problems over there, which was where the guy that supposedly was taking care of the lakes was living at. So he knew what was going on over there, and he didn't do anything about it. But so anyway, it's kind of interesting to me what these cities have done with their lakes. So there are a lot of different entities involved in lake building in Oklahoma. Now, I believe Eufala was built by the state, and I believe it was built in either the late 60s or early 70s, because I seem to remember when it was either being built or when it was a new lake or something. I mean, we were down here off and on visiting my grandmother, and then we moved down here and lived here for a while when I was a kid before we went back to Colorado. So I remember some of that stuff. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, I think I'm going to conclude this little episode. I think I'm about to talk myself out. I hope you enjoyed getting a look at this part of Oklahoma. I know you didn't get to see a whole bunch of the lake, but you got to see a little glimpse of it. I'm sure Oklahoma would welcome you with open arms if you want to come visit and take a look in person. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. If you like these videos, I'd be really happy if you would subscribe, and y'all take it easy and come ride with me again next time. Thanks and bye.